Welcome everyone to Pathways Through the Orchard. Today is Parshat Yitro, the giving of the Torah, and we have a number of beautiful insights, and hopefully we can get through all of them. So we're going to start with, in a way, a numerical deep understanding of this parsha. So this parsha is the 17th parsha in the Torah. The number of the parshas have significance. The number of verses have significance. So we're going to start with the number of parsha of the 54 parshas of the Torah. This is the 17th. 17 is Gematria Tov, good. And we have an expression from the sages, Ein Tov Ela Torah. There's no good in the ultimate sense other than Torah. Everything connected with Torah is by definition, in essence, is good. Tov. So this word Tov and its numerical value goes back to the first verse of the Torah, and that is Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. And there is a name of God embedded in the acronym of et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. Et, the Aleph, Ha Shemayim, the Hey, Ve'et, the Vav, and Haaretz, another Hey. So this is a very secretive name of God that is embedded in the first verse of the Torah. And what is the meaning? The idea, though, is that these four letters equal Tov. Equal Tov, equal good. And it is said that when we call the Baal Shem Tov, literally means the master of the good name. Baal Shem Tov. And some say it refers to this name of God, the name of goodness. But what is the meaning of this name of God? Well, it's in the actual words that it's an acronym from. Et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. In other words, this name is what connects heaven to earth. That's the connecting meaning of this name, this special name of God. An Aleph and a Hey and a Vav and a Hey. So how is that connected to this being the 17th portion? The portion that the Torah is given to Am Yisrael is the 17th parsha. So it's good, but also it's telling us that the function of the Torah is to connect heaven to earth. Et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. Moshe goes up to, as it were, to heaven. And in the Midrash, that's how it's talked about, that Moshe goes up to heaven and he brings down the Torah to earth. So that's the connection with this being the 17th portion. Now, the fact that this name of 17, this name of good, is connected to this parsha is telling us that the purpose of creation was fulfilled with the giving of the Torah to the Jewish people at Mount Sinai. How do we know this? It's a Rashi on the words in leading up to the Shabbat of Bereshit, the explanation of the first Shabbat, the Shabbat of creation. But it begins Yom HaShishi, Vayichulu Hashamayim va'aretz. And it was on the sixth day when God finished the heavens and the earth. And Rashi asks a question, why is it Yom HaShishi? The Hey of HaShishi is like the sixth day, like with a capital T, the sixth day. But if you look at the other days of creation, none of them have a Hey. It's not Vayhi Erev Vayivoker Yom HaSheni. It was evening and it was morning, the second day. It's just Yom Sheni, Yom Shlishi, Yom Revi'i. So Rashi asks, why does this day have Hashishi? So he says it's alluding to a different sixth day. Here, this is the conclusion of the sixth day leading into the first Shabbat. But Rashi said it's alluding to another sixth day. Which sixth day is that? The 6th of Sivan. That's when we celebrate and observe the giving of the Torah at Sinai on Vav Sivan. So Rashi continues and says that God said to the Jewish people, I'll go back, that until we received the Torah at Sinai, it was as if the whole creation was on condition. It was on condition that we would receive the Torah at Sinai on the 6th of Sivan. And Rashi continues by saying, and the Midrash says, that God says, if you'll receive the Torah today, meaning on the 6th of Sivan, good. And if not, I'll return the world to chaos and void, to tohu vavohu. So in other words, all of creation was on condition that Israel would receive the Torah at Sinai. So this connects the very first verse of the Torah of creation. Et hashamayim ve'et haaretz, God in the beginning created the heavens and the earth. And again, the heavens and the earth make an acronym of a 4-letter name of God that equals 17, the good name, and the idea that this is the 17th parsha of the Torah. So this is when the world, in a sense, became firm in its foundation, because the condition on which creation came into being was now fulfilled. So that's a very, very deep understanding of just a simple idea that this is the 17th portion in the Torah. Now, how many verses does this parsha have? This parsha has 72 verses. 72 is gematria chesed, loving kindness. And just like we said before, the sages said, Ein tov el Torah, there's no good other than Torah. They also said, they called the Torah Torat Chesed, a Torah of Chesed. And actually in Eshet Chayil, which we sing to the women before we make Kiddush Friday night, we sing Eshet Chayil, the last chapter of Mishlei, of the book of Proverbs. And there we say, Torah Chesed al Lashona, that a Torah of Chesed is on her lips. And we talk about the Torah also in the feminine. Eitz Chaim Hi, it is a tree of life in the feminine. So this parsha has 72 verses. So it's also hinting that not only is the essence of the Torah chesed and loving kindness. In fact, the sages say that the entire Torah from beginning to end is imbued with chesed. But it also points out the idea that all of creation is an expression of God's desire to have relationship, to have a receiver of his chesed. Because when we want to give, when we want to love, we need a recipient. And so the giving of the Torah is the ultimate gift of chesed to not only the Jewish people, but to the entire world. Now, the fact that this Parsha is 72 verses, let's go a little bit deeper into the number 72 as it will relate to these ideas. So the four-letter name of God can be permuted in many different ways. Each month is connected to a certain permutation of the four letters of God's name. But because two of the letters can be written in different ways, the letter Hey can be written Hey Hey, Hey Aleph, and Hey Yud. And a Vav similarly can be Vav Vav, Vav Aleph Vav, Vav Yud Vav. So when you take all of that in mind, you can make 27 different permutations when you fill out God's name. What do we mean by fill out God's name? The milui. So you take the letter Yud and you spell it out. Yud Vav Daled. Then you take the Hey and you spell it out. But like we said, it can be spelled out Hey Yud, Hey Aleph, or Hey Hey. And you continue. And so the Arizal revealed that four of these permutations were the most important. And they're connected to the four Cabalistic worlds and many other ideas of the number four. And the highest one is called the name of 72. Because when you spell out God's name, the Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey, and you spell out the Hey, Hey Yud, and the Vav, Vav Yud Vav, and you compute the gematria of the four letters of God's name, it equals 72. That's why I brought this, a little bit Kabbalistic, but in Kabbalah, it's a very, very important idea that the full spelling of God's name, one of the most important, equals 72, which equals chesed. And it equals Torah chesed. The idea of the whole Torah is God's expression of chesed. And God's whole creation is his expression of chesed. So when you spell out God's name in this way, there are four Yuds. There's the Yud of the letter Yud, a Yud in the Hey, a Yud in the Vav, and a Yud in the Hey. So Yud equals 10. So 4 times 10 equals 40. And this is one of the inner secrets of the 40 days that Moshe spent on Mount Sinai receiving the Torah. So again, this is a very deep Kabbalistic explanation. So we could ask, why didn't Moshe spend 30 days or 50 days or 60 days? Spend 40 days because it was very, very connected to the meaning of God's name when it's spelled in this way. It's the name of Chesed. So here, this name is filled in with the Yuds. And the letter Yud is the smallest of the letters. And so it represents Tzimtzum. It represents contraction. And we know from the call it Kabbalistic cosmology that the Arizal explained that in order for an infinite God to create a finite world, that the first act was an act of contraction, that God had to make, as it were, space for a finite world, a so-called independent world. Though we know everything is imbued with the Spirit of God and the energy of God, but nonetheless, the Ari explained that the first act of creation is actually contraction. And so that is the letter Yud. And so here again, this whole insight, we're connecting creation to the giving of the Torah. But what's interesting is 3 times a day we say the 145th Psalm, and we add in the beginning the verses of Ashrei Yoshvei Veitecha. Happy are those who dwell in the house of God. And it's goes by the letters. Each verse is one of the letters. So when we get to the pay, it's Poteach et yadecha umazbia l'kol chai ratzon. So we state or pray, God, please open up your hand. Again, we're talking symbolically. Open up your hand and provide for all living. So the word for hand is yadecha, open your hand. But you'll notice that the word for hand is the same letters as the letter Yud. And so what's interesting is that the hand has, the 2 hands have 10 fingers. The Yud equals 10. And so our sages said, don't read it, open up your hand. Rather, read it, open up your aspect of Yud. In other words, God, we understand that you had to contract in order to create the world. Now we're asking you to give freely, to open up that aspect and provide spiritually and materially for all creation. So here, when we talk about the giving of the Torah, we're talking about the giving of the 10 commandments. And the 10 commandments symbolize the entire Torah. That's what we call it, the giving of the Torah. But really, it was really, I wouldn't say only, but it was 10 commandments. But we're told that those 10 commandments, in a sense, include all the other commandments. We actually see this in a beautiful count of letters. We're counting which parsha this is, how many verses. In the 10 commandments, there's 620 letters, which equals Keter, the crown, the highest of the Sfirot. So the Torah is coming from the highest place, from the most primordial place. And the 620, we know we have 613 mitzvahs in the Torah. So how do we understand that there's 620 letters? So there's 2 explanations. One is that if you add the 7 mitzvot, b'nei Noach, the 7 mitzvahs of the children of Noach, the universal mitzvot, it equals 620. 613 and 7 equals 620. And the other is that there's 7 mitzvot from the rabbis that have the power, have the status of a Torah mandated mitzvah. So if you add those 7, 613 and 7 is 620. So the 10 commandments include all of the mitzvot, all of the mitzvot. So in the 23rd Psalm, we say, Ach tov v'chesed yirdefuni kol yemei chayai. May it be that only good and loving kindness accompanies me all the days of my life. So here we see a beautiful thing. We began this insight by saying this is the 17th parsha, 17 equals good, tov. And then we said this parsha is 72 verses. That's chesed. So here we have in one verse, ach tov v'chesed yirdafuni kol yemei chayai. God, let your goodness and your loving kindness pursue me, be part of me, accompany me all the days of my life. So that's just a very, very beautiful way to conclude this idea. But actually, I want to add one more thing here. Is when we hear the number 72, so in last week's Parsha, B'Shalach, as we're coming to the Reed Sea, we notice that the Egyptians are following us and with blood in their eyes. And there are 3 verses in a row that have 72 letters. It's a very, very rare phenomenon. There's only one other place in the Torah that you'll have 3 verses with the same amount of letters. And so in statistics, it's 1 in many, many, many millions that you would have 3 verses in a row that just happen to have the same number of letters. So we're told that these 3 verses make up 72 3-letter names of God. We're not going to go into depth with that right now. This is a very Cabalistic concept that there are 72 3-letter names of God. Now, the reason I'm bringing this is because 72, again, is chesed. But if you multiply 72 times 3, because there are 3 verses that have 72 letters. So if you multiply 72 times 3, you get 216, which is gematria gevura. Now, for those who are familiar with the sfirot, on one hand you have chesed, on the other hand you have gevura. So here's an amazing thing. You have 72 3-letter names of God, and 72, they're all full of chesed, of loving kindness. And yet when you multiply all the letters of these 3 verses, you get gevura, which we usually think of it as the opposite. And the reason that it's important here is that we have different ways that we refer to God. And one of them is in relationship to the giving of the Torah. So the expression that the sages used for God giving us the Torah is mipi hagvura, from the mouth of gevura. God gave us the Torah. So why do they say that? Is because if you look at the verse introducing the 10 Commandments, it uses the name Elohim. Elohim is the name of Gevura. Vayedaber Elohim et kol hadavarim ha'ela lemor. And God spoke all of these things, saying. And then the 10 Commandments begin. So it's pointed out, and with this we will conclude, because we're trying to connect creation and the giving of the Torah. The giving of the Torah is the completion, is the fulfillment of the very reason, the condition in which the world is created. And so the verse preceding the 10 Commandments has 7 words and 28 letters, which is exactly the amount of words and letters of the first verse of the Torah. So this is connecting, once again, creation to the giving of the Torah. Mipi hagevura, because in the story of creation, the account, only the name Elohim is mentioned. And here it's Elohim is speaking out the 10 commandments. So again, that connects creation with the giving of the Torah. So that was our first insight for the night. The next one is based on a number of teachings from Reb Shlomo. And it's based on the idea, the parsha begins, V'yishma Yitro. And Yitro heard. Yitro is the father-in-law of Moshe. Moshe has not seen him since he went back to Egypt and was the agent through which the 10 plagues happened. And then Moshe brought Israel out, and we're on the way to Mount Sinai. And it says, Vayishma Yitro. Yitro came and he joined the Jewish people. According to tradition, he becomes like the archetypal convert. He heard and he came. So Rashi asks, what did he hear? Doesn't say specifically in the verse what he heard. Just says he heard and he came. So Rashi says he heard about the splitting of the Reed Sea, and he heard about the war with Amalek. And then he came. So Reb Shlomo has some beautiful insights into what moved Yitro about the splitting of the Reed Sea. It doesn't say he heard about all the 10 plagues. Those were also miraculous, just like the splitting of the Reed Sea. So why the Reed Sea and not the 10 plagues? Moshe hits a rock and draws water out. That was also a miracle. So why these two things moved Yitro to come and go through the process of wanting to convert? So Reb Shlomo says like this, says that if we compare Amalek to Yitro, Amalek represents someone who doesn't believe in anything. Everything just happens the way it happens. Everything is a coincidence. There's no plan to the world. There's no direction to the world. And that's what actually, how it's interpreted. It says that Amalek came upon Israel. Karchacha. They just happened to come upon them. And the word, this word, karchacha, comes from the word mikre, which means stam. It just happened. So Amalek represents someone who doesn't believe in anything. Yitro, he was the Kohen of Midian, and he was involved with all kinds of spiritual, mystical, magical kinds of ideas. So he believed in everything. Everything goes. I'll try everything, anything. And so when Yitro heard, though, about the war with Amalek, so he realized you can't just believe in everything. Like there has to be some focus. There has to be some sense of direction. And it reminds me of a line from the group, the Counting Crows. If anyone is familiar with them, the Counting Crows. So they have a very, very famous song called Mr. Jones. And in this song, it happens that the leader of this group is Jewish, though he certainly doesn't identify openly as Jewish. But when you hear his lyrics, he's a very deep neshama. And in the song, he says, I I don't believe in anything, but I want to be someone who believes, who believes, who believes. And that's like Yitro. That's like Amalek. But Yitro saw, I don't want to be like that. I want to be someone who believes in something specific, not just everything goes. So that's one idea. And so Reb Shlomo said, it's much harder to try to relate to or help someone who doesn't believe in anything than someone who believes in everything. Because if you don't believe in anything, it's very, very hard, a hard sell to get through, because the person in essence doesn't believe in anything. So he's not going to believe anything that you say either. But the other thing was, Yitro heard about the splitting of the sea. So what moved him, other than that it was a miracle? So when Yitro saw that the sea could change, in other words, there's a midrash that says that when God created the waters, he did it on condition that in the future, when Israel came to the sea, that it would change its basic nature and split. The nature of water is to stay in whatever place it's in. And so when Israel came to the Yam, to the sea changed. It was able to change its nature. And so when Yitro saw that, it was like, well, if the sea can change, so can I. I can also change. So Reb Shlomo continues and points out that sometimes to be true to ourselves, we don't change. In other words, we're not blown in any particular direction by any kind of fad or peer pressure. We know what we need to do, we know what we believe, and we don't change. But other times, the only way to get to your true self is to change. And this is what's called one's first nature and one's second nature. We're all born with a certain nature, and then that is compounded by nurture. Because nature and nurture has such an important part in formulating who we are, what we believe in, what our personality traits are. Some are genetic, some are learned, but when you put them together, they're both factors that mold our first nature. But then we have what's called tikkun, tshuva, change, that we don't have to be stuck in the mold that we either inherited in our genes or in the way we were brought up. We have the ability to change. That's what tshuva is. That's what renewal is all about, hitchadshut. That's called one's second nature. So Yitro, when he saw the water was able to change its basic nature, well, so can I. I can also change my nature and learn something new, expand my horizons, deepen my consciousness. So these were ideas from Reb Shlomo. And I just want to add that in Hebrew, the words for second nature is teva sheni, one's second nature, teva sheni. Excuse me. The gematria of teva sheni equals emet, 441. So if you ask, well, what's more true, my inherited nature, my instinctual nature, my nature and nurture nature, or my ability to take that and not, God forbid, destroy that or trample on that, but refine it, elevate it, fix it. And that's called truth, teva sheni. And that's what Yitro heard. According to Reb Shlomo, that's what Yitro heard. He heard, if the water can change, I can change. And I don't want to be like Amalek that doesn't believe in anything, because it sounds paradoxical, but if you believe in everything, or I'll say it differently, someone who thinks they can be everything to everyone all the time will usually end up being nowhere and no place. In other words, we can't do it all. We have to be able to focus. We have to have direction. We have to have purpose. We have to have a certain path that we're walking. Yes, we can change along the way. We can expand the path, but we can't do everything all the time. Let's say you wake up in the morning. In theory, a person can make a million different decisions what they're going to do that day. Okay, you'll say, oh, I have a job. Well, you could decide to call in sick. You could decide to quit. You could decide to take early vacation, early retirement. The idea is we have a multitude of choices we can make at any particular moment. If we get overwhelmed with that, we end up nowhere at all. And that's what Yitro started to see, that by believing in everything, he was, in the end, he was like Amalek. He wasn't believing in anything, really. So that's a very, very beautiful idea from Reb Shlomo. I'll add one more thing. And Rashi tells us, why was he called Yitro? Yitro comes from the word yeter. Yeter means more, to add, yoter. And so here, again, Yitro is leading his whole life in a certain way. And then he realizes, I can do more than that. I can add something. I can change. So he was called Yitro. And by becoming Jewish, so he added upon himself more and more mitzvot. Rashi explains this. So in the very parsha that the Torah is given, it's a sign to us that we don't have to be stuck in our ways. There's Am Yisrael before we received the Torah, and there's Am Yisrael after we received the Torah. We were ready, na'aseh v'nishma, we'll do and we'll hear. Again, the word to hear. We're ready to hear something new. We want something yoter. We're ready for something more. We shall all be blessed with that kind of consciousness, spiritually always wanting more. Okay, here is another beautiful idea based on idea from Reb Shlomo. I'm adding to it. It's brought down in the Gemara that the two tablets of the law were quite miraculous. Is it said that the letters were chiseled, engraved in the stone, but it was engraved in a way that it went through the stone, but either way that you looked at it, you saw the letters in the right way, which is based on a miracle. Because if you write a letter and you look at it this way, but it's chiseled through, if you look the other way, it's the opposite. But here you could see the 10 Commandments from both sides. So this is a very beautiful idea. Like we're taught, Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chaim. These and these are the words of the living God. In other words, when there's two sages who disagree, even when we choose one of them to base the normative Jewish law upon, we still don't totally reject the other idea. For sure, there's a point of truth in that opinion. Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chaim. So the two tablets of the law were like that. But the sages point out there were two letters that were even more miraculous. And that was the letter Mem and the letter Samach. Why? The Mem is in the shape of a square, and the Samach is a circle. And so if it was chiseled out, well, how did the letter stay in midair? And so they say that was like an additional miracle, that the Mem and the Samach were, as it were, floating in midair of the tablets. So Reb Shlomo delves into what's the significance of those two letters. So his idea is very, very beautiful. So first of all, the Mem is like a square, as I said, and the Samach is a circle. So he said a square contains everything in it, but it has sharp edges, whereas a circle is more flowing. It flows in a circle. You're not going to get bumped into sharp edges. So he said the Mem represents Moshe. Of course, the first letter of Moshe's name is a Mem. Mem equals 40. Moshe is on Mount Sinai for 40 days to receive the Torah. But if you remember in the dialogue between God and Moshe at the burning bush, so Moshe kept on saying, send Aaron. Aaron is much better than me. So Reb Shlomo says Aaron represents the Samach, because whether it's completely true or not, when most people think of Moshe, we think of the letter of the law. We think Moshe Rabbeinu brings down the Torah from heaven. And we think of Moshe as somewhat unapproachable, just in a category of his own, which he was. And Aaron is the one everyone could approach. He was making peace with everyone. And so the Mem represents Moshe, and the Samach represents Aaron. And so what was Moshe saying? Send Aaron. Because at the burning bush, God said that you will return to this mountain and you will serve me here. So God was alluding to the fact that when you come out of Egypt, you'll come back to this mountain, which was Mount Sinai. Then it was called Chorev. And you'll serve me here. This is where I will give you the Torah. And so Moshe was saying, why don't you give the Torah as a circle, not as a square? So when we really think about it, the written Torah is like the square. It's like a code. It's brief. It's to the point. It's terse. And it seems very black and white. When you read the written Torah, the mitzvot seem very black and white. But when you get to the oral Torah, so the oral Torah becomes like the circle. All of a sudden, certain mitzvahs in the Torah that seem very black and white, it turns out there's so much gray there. There's so much gray. There's so many different ways to interpret it, and so many different factors in each Jewish law. So that's like the samach. And so Aaron is like the samach. He's making peace with everyone. It's the Torah that's flowing. And Moshe is more like the square. But the truth is, we need the square. We need specifics. We need direction. We need absolute clarity of the square. So we need both. We need the written Torah and the oral Torah. So Reb Shlomo says another thing, that Moshe is identified with Mount Sinai, and Aaron is associated with the Mishkan, the tabernacle. The tabernacle becomes the prototype of the temple in Jerusalem. And the Kohen Gadol in the temple was the main figure, just like in the tabernacle. So there's a verse in Psalms that says, Yerushalayim harim savivlo. Yerushalayim is built in a way that hills surround it. So if anyone's been to Yerushalayim, Yerushalayim is not flat. It's built on a series of hills all around. And in a sense, the temple, the old city of Jerusalem, the original Jerusalem, is surrounded by rings of hills. So, just one second. Yeah. And so Aaron is the samach. Yerushalayim harim savimla is like a samach. Yerushalayim is surrounded with this flowing energy. And that's why the prophet Zechariah said that when Mashiach comes, a river will flow out of Yerushalayim, actually from the Temple Mount, all the ways to the Yam Acharon, to the final sea, and sweeten all the waters in the world. So that's Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim is this flowing water, the samach, the circle. And Moshe, what would we do without the written Torah? The oral Torah is based on the written Torah. We need the square. We need the mem. We need Moshe. So we need both of them. And so when you put these two letters together, the samach and the mem, it spells sam. Sam means literally a drug, a healing drug in the good sense. And so the sages say an amazing thing. It says that the Torah can be a Sam Chaim or a Sam Mavet. It can be an elixir of life, or it can be an elixir of death. So how life is obvious. And when we're connected to Torah, and in fact, one of the expressions is Torat Chaim, a Torah of life. Eitz Chaim hi. It's a tree of life. But we're told that when a person uses the Torah for their own agendas, I won't get into specifics for this, but when it becomes, it's used for different purposes than what it was created for, what it was given to us for, then it represents a Torah of death, not an elixir, but a drug of death. So that's how you put the Samach and the Mem together. So obviously we want it to be a Sam Chaim. The Samach and the Mem, the written Torah and the oral Torah, together make a drug of life. There's some people who want to interpret the Torah without the oral Torah, only the written Torah. So that becomes a major, major mistake. Not only a mistake, but we will get the totally wrong impression of what the Torah is teaching us if you separate it from the oral tradition. Okay, so one more insight for this evening. And this whole evening, I've been speaking about that this portion is about the giving of the Torah. But in the beginning, Yitro comes and he sees that Moshe is judging the people. And you get the idea that Moshe is absolutely alone in judging the people. He received the Torah. And I have to say that Rashi says that this is one of the places in the Torah where the expression Ein Mukdam v'Muchar b'Torah. In other words, the beginning of this parsha is not in chronological order. It actually comes after the Torah is given. Because here Moshe has brought the Torah down, and now he's judging the people. But the picture you have is the line goes around the block because the only one judging the people is Moshe. So Yitro comes to him and says, this is not going to work. I have some advice for you. And he explained the idea that you have to delegate. You have to set up a judicial system where there'll be judges of 1,000, and judges of hundreds, and judges of 50, and judges of 10. You can't do it all by yourself. You will get worn out, and the people will get worn out. And it says that Moshe listened to Yitro, and he appointed judges and set up a whole judicial system. And he remained at the top of the pyramid for all those questions that couldn't be answered by other people. But he delegated. So from this, we have a very, very important idea. And that is, the Gemara says it like this. If someone says to you, there's wisdom among the nations, believe them. If they tell you there's Torah among the nations, don't believe them. In other words, for right now, the Torah was given to the Jewish people, and its observance and its explanations have to come through the Jewish people. They can spread to the whole world. And in fact, for those who are looking at their Living with the Times on Sunday that was sent to you today, That is the theme, that the Torah is meant ultimately for everyone. But the idea is there wisdom among the nations? So absolutely. And Maimonides said, take wisdom where it's found. Wherever it's found, take wisdom. So I want to elaborate on this very, very quickly. This idea that, and this is in our day, this is one of the, I'll call it the cutting edges of Torah today, is the attempt to unify secular knowledge and Torah wisdom. There are hundreds of books now that will discuss virtually any idea in the arts and sciences with an explanation of parallel teachings in the Torah, more than parallel teachings in the Torah. In Pirkei Avot, it says, turn it and turn it again, for everything is in it. It's talking about the Torah. And so here the idea, especially as promoted by Rav Ginsburg, is ultimately all knowledge and wisdom of all the sciences, all the arts will have its source in the Torah. And so now you can get books that are putting together quantum physics and Kabbalah, the environment and Jewish thought, economics and what the Talmud says about it, psychology and Torah teaching, especially Hasidut. Whatever it is, biology, zoology, we have I can't think of his name right now. He writes lots of books about zoology and all of the sciences. And so very quickly, I just want to make everyone aware that Maimonides says very clearly, he says, if you want to understand and know God, you have to look and study the world, because God created the world. And so if you want to understand the creation, you want to understand God, you have to understand the world that he created. It's a very, very big thing in Maimonides. He was known as one of the greatest doctors of his and many other generations. And his mind was very scientific. Rabbi Bachai ibn Pakuda, he's the author of Duties of the Heart. So he also was very, very, very much into this idea of studying astronomy and mathematics and biology and physics in their day. He lived in the 1100s. But they promoted this idea that there isn't a disconnect between the world and Torah. God created the world and he gave us the Torah, so they have to be connected. The Maharal of Prague wrote the following, and I'm quoting the Maharal of Prague: a man ought to study everything that will enable him to understand the essential nature of the world. One is obligated to do so, for everything is God's work. One should understand it all, and through it recognize one's creator. This is from the Maharal of Prague. Rav Kook, the first chief rabbi, then it was called Palestine, the first chief rabbi of Israel, also was very, very big on promoting the idea of uniting secular knowledge and Torah wisdom. And also the Vilna Gaon, was known to be a great student of music theory, of geometry, of mathematics, of astronomy, of physics. And he also promoted this idea that learning all of the secular knowledge that there is to learn is not against Torah, it takes us away from Torah. It adds to the Torah. And of course, I mentioned that Rav Ginsburg has dedicated really 50 years of teaching, and at this point, hundreds of books dedicated to unifying secular knowledge and Torah wisdom. So this was connected to the idea that Moshe could have said to Yitro, with all due respect, I was the one who received the Torah in Sinai. I know what I'm doing. No, Moshe heard Yitro's advice. He heard the wisdom in it, and he accepted it. And he put it into practice. So we should keep that understanding. It's in our day, it's very, very important. Very important. We're not looking, I have to state very clear, we're not looking to validate the Torah. That's not the idea. We don't look to science to prove the Torah. The Torah is in a class of its own. But again, we need to understand that God created the world, and we can learn so much about ourselves, about the Torah, about God, by looking at the world, studying the world, and unifying the idea of Torah, wisdom, and secular knowledge. No.